Papa Todd takes. This is Papa Todd. We're going to talk today Safety 101. Let's talk about OSHA and its creation and whether OSHA is good or bad. There's debate one way or the other. I don't think you can debate that OSHA's influence since its establishment in 1970, or OSHA, I guess, was 1971. I don't think you can argue that it's been good. About a 60 to 70% reduction in workplace fatalities since then. And those numbers were pretty consistent, if not climbing. And then disabling injuries, I think it was 2.5 million a year, and that's dropped. Oh my God, 80 or 90%, something like that. So I don't think there's a legitimate argument to be made that OSHA was not good for the American worker. I think it was excellent. Now, does OSHA overstep from time to time? There's a debate to be had, right? I think in my work experience, I've been doing OSHA, I've been doing workplace safety now for 18, 19 years. I'd have to sit down and really crunch the numbers. 15 to 20 years. That's how long I've been doing it. I think one of the ones where you could really debate whether it was overstep, and it was overstep by the federal government whole. I don't think you had an overzealous group in the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. I think it was more from overall government control. But during COVID, they were just like everybody else. Everybody was scrambling. How do we keep people from getting sick and dying? At the time, and they were going to start mandating shots, and now you start getting into different conversations. I'm not going to take a side right there one way or the other on this platform anyway, right? And then there was just a lot of stuff that was going on, but at the end of the day, I think everybody was trying to do what was best for people, and I'll probably make a video on that alone, because as a safety professional, got into it, and you would go through these your emergency response plans. That every place has to have an emergency response plan. What are you going to do in the event of this? What are you going to do in the event of that? Fire, severe weather, chemical leaks, stuff like this, right? So what are you going to do all of this? And there was one about global pandemic that would always sneak up in some of them. And me and a lot of safety people that I knew anyway, when we'd get together for meetings or whatever like that, we kind of joke about that one, because global pandemic, you just see that in the movies, right? That's not going to happen. And here we were in 2020 dealing with exactly this, and a lot of us were pretty unprepared because we hadn't taken it seriously. So lesson learned, right? And so now we all develop these plans. What if it happens again? Because once it's happened once, likely to happen again, right? So anyway, that being said, let's go back to the beginning. Why OSHA? Why did they create this? Why did they feel the need? And I talked about the numbers for the deaths in the 60s, right? But let's go all the way back. Let's go back into like the early 1900s. Manufacturing was booming. You talk about like Ford and they were pumping stuff out, and there were really no workplace rules. The Department of Labor, I don't even think existed back then. And so you had workers that were working 7 days a week, 12 to 16-hour days. I mean, not everywhere, but a lot of places were doing this kind of thing, and they were getting paid pennies. I mean, just literally pennies. They weren't getting paid very much at all. They would create towns. That's how baseball was created in the United States. They had to keep people busy, and so they started playing baseball just to keep people active and all this good stuff. So and give them pastimes, something where they could have fun, but they were living in communities that were built to support factories, right? And then so you had no child labor laws, so you had little kids going back there because little kids could fit in small spaces and machines and get to places adults couldn't get into to work. They talk about like the nimble children, or the nimble fingers of the children, right? They would go back in there. Horrible working conditions. Well, then let's say you're working in one of these factories in 1910, and there's no machine guarding, so to speak. It's just people working around this stuff, horribly dangerous, and somebody get their arm caught, tear their arm off, right? And so now that, let's say they survive, I don't know any numbers on it, but from reading, having things, they just kind of get, well, here you go. Maybe they'd give them some kind of severance pay or whatever like that. but they had to keep producing. That's the way they viewed it, right? So they'd keep producing, and those people just get discarded. And now their family is having to fend for themselves. There was no protection for the workers. There was no workers' compensation at the point in time. That's come in since. So a lot of things have been getting in place. And then you go to this Triangle Shirtwaist factory. So Triangle Shirtwaist was a garment factory that made these shirts for women. If you look in the pictures of the working class back in the early 1900s, you'd see these women, they have the dresses down or the skirts down, and it's tight around the middle and big puffy shoulders and long sleeves and the button down shirt with a high collar. That was a shirtwaist, and it was really big. It was like the big deal. And so they had all these women, mainly women and girls, right? There's no child labor laws. And so they were working in the Northeast. I can't remember the state it was. It might have been Massachusetts, but I might be completely off on that. They were working in this plant. Oh, maybe it was New York. I want to say it was a bigger city. Regardless, they were working in the factory, and they suspect that it was like a cigarette butt that made its way into a can full of rags or waste from this. Well, the people have been getting upset because these women and children are going out for cigarette breaks, taking long breaks, doing all this. So what do? So they chained the exit doors. There was a problem with the elevator that wasn't working right. And so when this fire started, if you think about it, it's a garment factory. So it's just cloth everywhere. I'm sure there was oil, dust, you name it, all over the place. And this place went up pretty quickly. They couldn't get out. They were trapped in this plant. Pretty horrible. And it was 150, I think 146, 148 was the total number, died in that. And the vast majority of those were women and girls, and a lot of them were immigrants, died. And it was tragic. And so that sparked an outrage for, not locking doors, emergency response, and things like this. And then you go into the World War I, World War II, Korean War. You had munition plants, there was explosions, and you can only think, they were hiring, you had to hire people quicker, rush them through training, get them out there, higher production rates, just not ready for this. And so you had these kind of explosions. There was always issues with mining, right? Cave-ins, explosions, I think, were a bigger deal. And you can only imagine what they were breathing into the mines with no protections. You had the shipbuilding industry, now under the OSHA maritime standard, 1917, I believe. Asbestosis. The asbestos was used as a fire protectant in shipbuilding, and so that's why there was such a big deal there, right? And so construction was booming, people working on all these high-rises and stuff. So fall from heights was horrible, the number of people that were dying from falls from heights. So you put all that stuff together, and then in the late 60s, they start figuring out, hey, we got as many people dying in the workplace as we're dying in war. We got to do something about it. And so they finally did. And I do believe there was a mining incident in the late 60s that kind of triggered all of this. And so that's why OSHA exists. Somebody had to do something because there was no check on the companies, on the industries that were doing this. They just keep pumping stuff out. That was their whole priority. I don't think they probably didn't have ill intent. Some of them just didn't care, right? And the American worker is going to do what they have to do. They're going to go out there and work, and a lot of them just, you got that tough guy mentality. Yeah, we're going to push through it and everything like that. And so by coming in and doing that, you establish some rules and regulations that people have to follow. So when I entered the workforce in the late 80s, I'm in high school doing some jobs in local factories and stuff like this. For the most part, safety still didn't really exist. You had rules and stuff, and you had to go through your trainings, but there was very few safety professionals out there in the workforce. For the most part, they'd sit there and they'd go, hey, Supervisor B, you're our safety guy. You need to make sure we're doing all this kind of thing. And so that was really happening. As it's gone on, more and more companies hire their own safety professionals, at least at the corporate level, a lot of times at a plant level. Now, if you get down into really small plants, a lot of them still do not have a trained safety professional. What they have is, Joe Blow, Manager B, you're in charge of this OSHA stuff, make sure we're in compliance, which that's a lot of stuff to dump on somebody. I mean, the OSHA book, I don't have mine up here with me. It's not that thick. That's the short version of it, right? That's just like Cliff's Notes. And so there's a lot of standards out there. But for companies that have really taken it to heart, I'm fortunate to have worked with a few companies, and the one I'm with now really, really puts an emphasis on safety. They take it seriously. Some don't. Some see it as an annoyance. Just do enough to keep these guys off my back is the way they approach it. And you'll know those places when you work for them right away. And there are safety professionals. There are safety professionals out there that just, I say there's those that get it and those that don't, right? And so, and this is not to badmouth it. So myself, I entered the workforce and worked my way up. I was blue collar. I did some white collar stuff away. I think I've mentioned it before. I was an attorney for a few years, got back into blue collar, and then I was involved in workplace death. So I come to it I had a legal background, so I can interpret laws and kind of understand what the law was saying, what was the intent behind it. You kind of learn how to do that kind of thing. Understand the lawsuits, understand what they're looking for, understand fines and penalties and why they're doing all that. So that's helped me. My blue collar background really helped me to understand this is why it's dangerous, and it helps me understand why the workers don't like certain things, because I did it, and I understand when you're out there working, sometimes you just want to do your job and you want to get the job done, and a lot of these rules and regulations seems like they're just there to slow you down. Having done this now for 18 years or so, that's not the reason they're in there. We put those rules in there to protect you, the worker. Sometimes they seem a little overkill, right? So the plant I'm at now, we wear bump caps and cut gloves and everything as soon as you're on the floor. Well, why are we doing that? Well, so for instance, we have welders that now we have them in pappers, or full head shroud coverage, because they do a lot of grinding with dust, and the dust was piling up on top of the glasses, on top of their shrouds. They'd go to lift it up, dust would come down and get their eye. And so in one year we had several, 3 or 4 OSHA recordable injuries for dust in the eye. Now, fortunately, nobody was long-term hurt from that. They just need to wash out, but then they're going to give you a prescription medication for almost any time you get something in your eye, which is how that happened. But we couldn't stop it. The injury rates were inflated from this. We couldn't stop it. So we ended up putting everything. Now the welders are getting used to it now, but when we first did it, they thought it was just overkill. But we tried everything. We tried different goggles. We tried, you name it. Because those pappers are about a $2,000 investment per welder, and so and then you put a guy in it and he shows up and he quits or stops showing up after a month, and then you're kind of out that $2,000. So it's an investment. So when we're doing that, it's because we couldn't figure out any other way to prevent these injuries. One of the things in 1904 or OSHA 5A1, right? We owe you to keep you free from recognized workplace safety hazards. So you get elevated injuries, you are aware, right? They're recognized. You know that safety hazards exist, and you have to do something about it. So sometimes you kind of get forced into situations where it may feel like overkill, right? But that's the situation. Anyway, back to OSHA. So the creation of OSHA was for a need. Now, OSHA inspections are another thing, right? Somebody comes in, and people kind of see OSHA as the bad guy from time to time. Well, most of my inspections I've had over the years, and there's different reasons for inspection. It could be an employee complaint, anonymous employee complaint. Could be workplace fatality. It could be hospitalization, amputation, or just what they call regular program visits. So if you're a big enough industry, you're on a rotation about every 3 to 5 years. OSHA's going to come knock on your door unannounced just to do an inspection, just to kind of make sure, check up on you on the right. Most of those inspections I've had, and most OSHA officers that I've dealt with, are incredibly fair. They're good people. They're not out to get you. Now, there have been instances, I think I ran into one time, and I've heard nightmare stories where you have somebody that's just kind of out with an agenda, and they're out to get you no matter what. They're going to keep digging until they find something, and they're going to hone in. I can tell you one time years ago, I was working in Florida at the time, and we had anonymous employee complaint, and it's pretty obvious the employee who had done that was, well, I won't go into detail, but it was pretty obvious who had done it, and there was a sabotage issue there going on. But OSHA spent the next couple days there, walking through, going through. It was like, I don't know, it was like 20 some complaints with subparts and all this, and we went through the whole thing, and just no findings, or a couple of real small inconsequential findings, little ones on the spot that we could fix, which we did. That are the little ones that you keep trying to battle, right? But then they were checking. We had some steps on a platform built, and everything looks good. We're coming down. The OSHA inspector caught their toe on the bottom step, because the bottom step was a little off from the same height as the other ones, and it states in the standard that they have to be consistent. They came back out, they started measuring it, everything like that, and so we ended up with a couple $1,000 fine out of that because they had tripped. And so, okay, I can see that, but overall, it was a successful. But there, you hear about nightmare stories where they just come in and they just keep digging until they find something, and then they won't back off on it. But I think that's rare. I think that's very rare. Most of the OSHA inspectors I've dealt with have been very fair, and right now I'm in the state of Tennessee, and every time I've dealt with OSHA in the state of Tennessee, it's been a good interaction. So it's stressful as an employer and as a safety manager, because you feel like every decision you've ever made is being judged. But overall, OSHA's good. But they're like any government agency or any workplace. They have their flaws, but they're working through them and doing well. Like right now, there's a bill been raised to abolish OSHA. There's a debate to be had there, I guess. But to me, I would say, as long as there has to be some mechanism in place to protect the American worker, and whether that be every state has to develop its own form of OSHA or something like that, or at least have an enforcement mechanism for the laws, because there are workplaces out there, guys. I've seen them that would just disregard all workplace safety. I worked for a very large company just a few years ago. I was there less than a year. I couldn't wait to get out of it. But I think the company as a whole had a good safety program, but the facility I was at, which was a very large one, who had kind of carried the company through tough times, it was horrifying. It was the workplace safety there was non-existent, and the management would laugh in your face when you told them, "Hey, we need to do some assessments. I need some time," everything like that, and they would just slough it off. And the plant manager there, his whole thing was, well, the chairs have to be in good condition, but just looking the other way for machine guarding being ruined and stuff being run where people could reach into it and chemicals splashing all over. It was just, so there are places like that if you abolished OSHA, these places would run crazy, and I can't imagine. And a lot of times they're the biggest employer in an area, and so that is what it is. I'm fortunate to work for a company that takes it serious, trying to get into OSHA VPP, which I can tell you about at some other time. But anyway, there's a rundown of the basics of OSHA. Overall, OSHA's been really good. I've had good interactions with the agency when I've had it. They stress me out as a safety guy, because I'm always worried I forgot to cross a T or dot an I, kind of a thing. But overall, it's good. It protects the American worker, and it's created the occupation that I'm in that I love. So there you go, guys. This is Papa Todd Takes. I'm Papa Todd. Hope you enjoyed this little one, and I hope you come back for more. Take care and stay safe.